Hello, this is Ken Philpott again, program number 3 in our series on Santeria, from slavery to slavery. Santeria has 3 basic approaches to the world of the spirits. 1, the way of values, by honoring the ancestors or the Igun. The Igun are the spirits of the dead, and they come back, usually skipping a generation, maybe from grandmother to grandchild or grandfather to granddaughter, whatever. That's the Igun, E-G-U-N. 2, the way of power, a direct relationship with spiritual beings, that is the Orishas. By the way, back to the Igun, one of the things that's going on because of the infusion of spiritism and the use of mediums, the people who at funerals used to be involved with contacting the dead, these Igun people called the Igun Goons, or Igun Guns, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but at any rate, they're largely disappearing because of something we'll learn in a little bit, the growth of spiritism amongst those who worship the Orishas. So the second way is the way of power, direct relationship with spiritual beings. That is the Orishas, the gods and goddesses. And 3, the way of order, by way of fortune-telling or divination. I believe this comes from Joseph A. Murphy's book. First, we're going to talk about the way of values. Here, the spirits of the dead are sought to provide ashi. Ashi, this is the key ingredient, the obtaining of which is really involved in so much of what is involved in Santeria. Ashi gives the worshiper power to accomplish things, to be healthy, wealthy, and powerful over circumstances and enemies. The ancestors, called the Igun, the people of heaven, provide moral ashi or right behavior. By speaking to the living through one mounted or possessed by the Igun, advice and counsel is given. Now here comes the concept of possession. These Iguns, these spirits of the dead, they will mount or possess an individual and thereby be able to dispense information and counsel when a possession occurs. However, the information communicated from the dead to the living is not moral in the traditional sense. I said moral, but it's not moral in the traditional sense of right and wrong behavior. In fact, Santeria really doesn't have the concept of good and evil, God and Satan. Everything is basically the idea of imbalance. And the Orishas are to give counsel to reach that imbalance. It doesn't have really a moral ethic in the traditional sense. We'll talk about that a couple more times. Ashi from ancestors, or for Orishas for that matter, may be sought for protection in criminal activity. For example, La Santa Muerte is the perfect example of that. Protection from harm from enemies or the police, or for acquittals in criminal court cases. In some of the stuff that came back to me from my first series, attacked that notion about La Santa Muerte, but all of my research shows that that is what occurs. The Igun may prescribe means by which opponents or enemies may be overcome or harmed. Dead ancestors are said to reincarnate and to be born into their same families after 2 generations minimum. For instance, grandparents' souls may be reincarnated into the grandchildren. The concept of the immortality of the soul and its transmigration is central to Santeria. The doctrine of humans having an immortal soul, but not the idea of a transmigration of that soul, was borrowed from Spanish Catholicism, a doctrine which entered the church in the 4th and 5th centuries through the writings of Augustine, who was deeply influenced by Greek dualistic philosophy that posited the concept of a pre-existent soul and its transmigration. Second, the way of power. Through Orishas, who are personifications of Ashi, that people can use who honor them. In West Africa, the list of the Orishas, or gods and goddesses, numbered about 1,700. In the New World, the number shrank to 400 or 401. I found different numbers, depending on what information you have. But in practical reality, in contemporary Santeria, there are 17 Orishas. That I got from Joseph Murray, but Raul Canizaro says there are 20 but that are worshipped. And I'm not going to try to pronounce all of these names again. I'm not very fluent in Yoruba. You can get these names in, if you go into earthandvesseljournal.com and read the article, Santeria from Slavery to Slavery. The religion teaches that priests and priestesses of Santeria learn how to make the Orishas Ashi present for those who consult them, thus helping them with their lives, or so they understand. In a celebration known as Bembe, B-E-M-B-E, the Orishas will mount or possess dancers. It is when the dancer is possessed that the power of the Orisha is present and may be dispensed to other worshippers. Also, the worshipper can obtain Ashi by sacrificing to the Orisha. The sacrifice is known as an Ebo, E-B-B-O. The proper sacrifice is determined by divination, that is fortune-telling, performed by a Santera, or Babaloa. An Orisha may demand an animal sacrifice to obtain the animal's blood, which, when sprinkled or poured on an object, usually a sacred stone called the Otane, it feeds the Orisha, who then bestows Ashi for performing the wishes of the worshipper. Third, the way of order, which has to do with Ifa, I-F-A, or the oracle, the means of divining the future. This may be done by casting, throwing, or dropping palm nuts, cowrie shells, pieces of coconut on a special flat surface. The Babaloa, or higher level of priest, may use a special necklace like a chain that is thrown and then interpreted. For most of the history of Santeria, only the Babaloa could perform this pinnacle of divination, but in more recent times, this is done more and more by Santeros and Santeras. The diviner, through whatever means of divination, receives communication, or so they think. That's very important, or so they think, from the Orisha that mounted or possessed him or her at their initiation ceremony, or asiento, then passes on that prescription for the necessary action or remedy to be taken by the worshipper. Nearly all the sacrifices of Santeria that are offered to the Orishas are the result of divination. I'm going to stop there. That is the end of program number 3.